If you like looking at really cool, interesting cars, then this is the video for you. So we're going around Dill's Classic Car Show. There's some interesting models through the ages. There's certainly some modern classics in here. There's lots of inspiration for our projects, and I love seeing what people have done to their cars and just how well kept some of these early examples of motoring history are. A lot of the cars that we're featuring have got very interesting backstories, and we're just going to skip over the surface of it, but give ourselves an introduction into how cars have developed over the ages, from way back in the 40s and 50s right up to modern times, with some modern day classics. I don't think any classic car show would be complete without being well represented by Ford. Henry Ford was certainly one of the pioneers in the motor industry, building his first car in his backyard, basically in a workshop behind his home back in 1896. And you just see where this one man's vision has gone. You've got the British engine manufacturer Cosworths, founded in 1958, and they did a lot of work on the Formula 1 engines. By 1983 they'd been asked to go ahead with the 2-litre engine based on the original T88 cylinder block. But unlike that original engine that was naturally aspirated, it had to have a turbo this time, and the aim was to produce 180 brake horsepower on a road car and more than 300 brake horsepower when race tuned. Now, for a road car back in the 80s, 180 horsepower was a significant amount of power. The Ford Escort RS 2000 was produced between 1976 and 1980. This had a 2-litre engine, and back then it was putting out 110 horsepower, and it gave it a 0 to 60 time in 8.5 seconds. It felt really fast in a car like this. It was quite a light car, and it really handled nicely. You've got the early Escort Mexicos as well, really doing well in rally and making a real name for Ford and the Ford brand. Duratec engines have had a long history. It was a brand that the company used for a range of gas-powered 4-cylinder, 5-cylinder and 6-cylinder passenger cars. And Duratec over the years has been co-developed by Mazda and Volvo, and it ranges in size from a 1.3 litre engine to the mighty 3.7 litre V6 Cyclone. So it's not surprising that there's lots of mods and upgrades around for these Duratec engines, and we see them a lot in car shows. They've been transplanted into classics, and a lot of the more modern Focus RSs and STs also have highly modified Duratec engines in them. Throttle bodies are really useful for making extra power. The nice thing is, by choosing the trumpet size, you can determine where in the RPM range you make the peak amount of power in your engine. So it's a good way of fine-tuning, and having 4 throttle bodies, 1 for each cylinder, really allows you to set the engine up nicely, and there's no restriction at all in the intake. Modern cars also seem to appear a lot. Although this was a classic car show, I think the owners would argue that these cars are modern classics. Mountune have been big names in Ford tuning for about 40 years now here in the UK, and we also see a lot of Ford owners going with Oz Racing alloys, which are finished really nicely, and Brembo brake upgrades, which really do add substantial stopping power to the car. This Nissan Skyline GT-R is certainly making very good use of carbon fibre, with a lovely carbon fibre bonnet with vents, and the rear spoiler has little carbon fibre inserts and sets the car off really nicely. It's great to see these mods on such a substantial car as the GT-R. A Honda VTEC engine inside a tiny mini engine bay, which is pretty phenomenal. You've got to admire the ingenuity, and I certainly take my hat off to these guys. This is a really nice conversion. It looks like the engine was designed to be in there. So if you were looking for a pickup truck and you wanted something that was fast, could carry heavy loads and actually went quick, then look no further than a Dodge SRT Ram. It came with the 8.3 litre V10 engine from a Viper, so instead of cutting the weight down, you just stick a whacking great big engine in it, and this beast can accelerate from 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds. If you're looking for a fun car, the Caterhams are certainly somewhere to go. They're so light. The balance of them is superb. The engine is right there over the front wheels. It's almost a mid-mounted engine, and the driver's sitting slightly behind it. But everything is open. It's easy to work on. You can adjust the suspension settings. The Jaguar D-Type was quite richly steeped in historic racing. It was designed by Jaguar to compete in the Le Mans 24-hour race, much like Ford did with the GT40. It would have originally been designed for just one occupant, the driver, but you can see this example has got an extra canopy and a pop-out section that allows a passenger to sit alongside the driver. And in 1957, the D-Type cars took 5 of the top 6 places at Le Mans. This inline 6 is a really nice smooth engine. It produces a lot of power. We've got features coming up on tuning all the BMW engines, and we're going to go into more depth in them, so make sure that you stay tuned and you don't miss out on these features. But the inside of these cars is just really nice. I love the contrasting burgundy and black leather trims. But you go to the old BMWs and you can really see the design nods that are still echoed in today's BMWs. The grille particularly, it stands out among all other cars. It's always been one of the most recognisable grilles around. So this early BMW 2000 looked like it was in absolute mint condition. We've got here a BMW Z1. The interesting thing about these was the doors. They drop down inside the car. It's a bit of a leg over to get in. But in terms of car design, it was innovative, it stood out, and although this car is getting on a little bit now, it still looks absolutely fantastic and wouldn't look out of place today parked outside some swish funky golf club. The styling of the car, in my opinion, is absolutely timeless. You've got the trademark BMW grille that is still echoed today in more modern designs. So BMW owners certainly do a lot of mods to their cars, and we get a lot of feedback from BMW owners. You'd certainly expect to see some interesting Porsches, and this show didn't disappoint. We found this perfect example of a 944 S2 Cabriolet from 1989. The original production run for America was only 16 units and 4,000 for the rest of the world, but this was later increased. In 1991, Porsche unveiled a 944 Turbo Cabriolet. Now, at the time, these cars weren't appreciated for what they are, but today they're certainly appreciating classics, and they've got a dedicated following. And a few little details there on the brakes and the alloy wheels. This classic muscle car engine has had the Edelbrock treatment, a big name in tuning in America. The pancake style air filters just really nicely set up over the carb that they would have used, and remember how hard carbs were to set up and get them running right. And unlike modern cars, which tend to have a coil pack over each spark plug, this one has a large coil pack leading into a distributor that's feeding out to 8 different cylinders there. So Aston Martin is a British sports car maker, and it actually dates back to 1913. They hand build all of their cars. Even the panels that they use. The 4.3 V8 engine is featured in a number of models over the years. They've had a very limited set of engines, but they've managed to extract a lot of power, and some of the more recent models use a V12 engine or V8s with twin turbo setups. So the distinctive Aston Martin shaped grille, it's an inverted nod to the wing logo they used, and it was first applied back in 1948 to the 2-litre sports model. It's been a feature of the Aston Martin range to this date, and they found their niche really when they released the DB model in 1957. The DB4 and DB6 era spanned from 1961 to 1971, keeping the tradition alive of hand building all of the components that they used in their cars. So from 1987, Ford stepped in with funds to help keep the company afloat, and this saw the release of the DB7, one of my favourite Aston Martins. But right down to the brakes, you see tremendous details and thought has gone into these thoroughbred sports car. Apart from the grille at the front, most Aston Martins have got a vent on the side just by the front doors, and this is even echoed today on the DB11, which was released in 2016. The Aston Martin Vantage Coupe is a very special car, and this blue one has got a custom vent. It might be a standard limited edition model, but it looks stunning, and it still throws back to those original vents they used to apply at the front of the car all those years ago. So now we come to the hot rods, and I love these. They've always got interesting engines. This one has got 8 throttle bodies going into the engine, each with their own little filters on the top. It's been kept really clean and tidy and looks absolutely stunning. So hot rods are where you take a classic shaped car and modernise every aspect of it. You try to keep the curves and the look and feel. Often the roof is chopped and lowered, and the bonnet, instead of opening in a conventional modern way, it usually opens to the side, or it's completely removed, leaving the engine exposed, which saves a lot of cooling. But you'll see that these cars have very big wheels, dramatically lowered suspension and superb brakes and stopping ability. The painted lettering on the side of the tyre is also something of note of these hot rods, and they really do sound fantastic because of their rear wheel drive nature and their ability to host large wheels under the rear arches. You can put an awful lot of power through these chassis. Now, it's debatable as to whether they handle very well, but if you set them up right, you can certainly have a lot of fun with them. So this modern Mini, it's the R56 model of Mini. So the R56s were made between 2007 and 2009, and then there was a life cycle impulse regeneration on about 2010. But this one's got all of the Mini trim on it, and it really does look nice on that car. I've always been a fan of Minis. You see a lot of Minis at car shows. The Cobra still looks as fresh today as the day it rolled off the production line, and it looks just as clean. They've kept this looking awesome. Note the oil cooler in the front of the engine bay. No doubt that's there to help keep the engine bay temperatures down, which is a challenge when you've got such a small air vent at the front of the car. This car's air vent was actually larger than the originals. My history's not great, but I think this was a Mark III with the Ford 7-litre engine. Now, the Cobra produced around 1965 originally, and today there's lots of high quality replicas around that perform every bit as well or even better than the original. This particular one I think had the 4-barrel 780 CFM Holley carb fitted and the 427 engine, so this V8 engine would typically produce around 425 brake horsepower, which is phenomenal in a car this small. It sounds absolutely awesome when it starts up, and I've just got to applaud the owner's dedication to keeping the car in such good condition. So now we come to a slightly smaller 302 capacity engine in this Ford Mustang from the 1970s. Quite an important era for Ford because they were competing with Chevrolet, who just released the Camaro, so the Mustang and Camaro were going head to head, and it was important that Ford development keeps pushing the envelope. And the later version of this engine was the 302 Boss Mustang, which had more power, but the Ford Mustang rightly deserves its place in the historic Hall of Fame. I love seeing what people have done to their cars, and these shows really brings out some interesting mods. So we got some stretch tyres here. They're very, very low profile. It's quite a big stretch on it. I'm not a great fan of stretch tyres, but I understand a lot of people are really into them and really like them. But it just looks nice. It fills the arches nicely, and these alloy wheels really set it off quite well. So another option might be to just choose more rounded tyres. This Mini had a set of road legal slicks, and then I found this Merc and it had a really severe camber angle on it. It looked really nice. The owners spent quite a bit of time setting it up and getting it sorted. When I spoke to the owner, he told me that it does cost him a fortune in tyres, so it's not surprising having that much weight, that much of an angle, and quite a big stretch on that as well. The lovely deep dish alloy wheels look absolutely fantastic. And a car that's running this low is obviously on some kind of air suspension, allowing the ride height to be adjusted so you can drive it on the roads and just look really cool at shows like this. And we've got a really early example of an air-cooled engine here. There's no water circulation, no radiator. He's put an oil cooler on this, no doubt to help keep those engine temperatures down. So before we had fuel injection, you were stuck with carbs on engines, so setting the jets up and just making sure the fuel delivery matched the air intake was a bit of a challenge back then. But it's something drivers used to spend hours and hours just tinkering with and playing with, and it was really rewarding when they hit it right. You've got a bit of a compromise going on with carbs. You set the power up, but despite those limitations, drivers still got serious amounts of power out of them. So we've got here a classic Chevy. It looked really good. It's been slammed low. I'm guessing there's some sort of hydraulic or air suspension going on under there. I didn't get to speak to the owner. If you are the owner, please drop in the comments, let us know what you've done to it. So overall, I hope you've enjoyed that little trip round the classic car show with me. I certainly enjoyed my time there. It was interesting going around, having a chat with the owners, getting to know the cars, and actually seeing how car tuning and car styling has evolved over the years. And I think it's only by examining the roots and the origins of these things that you really appreciate where we are now. And it gives you an exciting glimpse at what's possible in the future with a little bit of imagination. So hope to see you at the show next year. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe. Don't forget to stay tuned. We've got lots of interesting features and articles coming up.